All right, guys, here we go. Kurt Magoosh, Slaughterhouse Sports, and we are going to talk about Mickey Joseph here on tonight's video. Nebraska head coaching search. What an interesting time for the Huskers. And we are going to talk about, Mickey and all of the dynamics now with the University of Nebraska here. And it's incredibly an interesting story. Tilt the headphones kind of like this, feel a little bit more comfortable. So Mickey Joseph, here's the thing with Mickey. Against Purdue, I thought that it might have been his best coaching performance that we have seen from him because the talent differential in that game, Trey Palmer and Casey Thompson are good, but Jeff Brom has been there about 3 or 4 years, and Aiden O'Connell's like a 30-year-old college quarterback that processes things at a computer-like level. And even though Casey Thompson's also like a 28-year-old college quarterback, Aiden O'Connell is a machine back there with his accuracy. He's a guy that I believe can even be a backup quarterback, just like David Blau of Purdue is a backup quarterback. Charlie Jones is a really good transfer receiver, and that offense is incredibly difficult to stop. I mean, that offense crushed Michigan State last year. They're an 8 or 9 win team in the Big Ten West. They have the best passing game by far in the Big Ten West, and it isn't even close. And they went to Purdue for a night game after Purdue just beat Maryland, and Maryland isn't a bad team whatsoever. So for Nebraska in that game, they were on the field 101 plays. There were no sacks in that game. So I know that you could point to the defensive line coach and say the defensive line coach can get better. And the running game, Anthony Grant averaged about like 1 yard a carry, which is the equivalent of like a 4A high school team playing a 6A high school team. But what Mickey Joseph has done at Nebraska is, even you go back to Bo Pelini, and I think that he had DeMarne Pearson-Elliott, Kenny Bell. I mean, he had a couple of, Westerkamp was a fine receiver. Nobody has, I believe, the athletic ability, the speed, the game-breaking ability of Trey Palmer. And Trey Palmer in these games has been the MVP of the season. I've heard many talk about it. He is. Against Indiana, he breaks the game open. Against Rutgers, he makes plays. Against Georgia Southern and in all their games, he at least has one deep ball a game. He looks like a guy that can play on Sundays. He looks like a guy that can even be a top 2 round pick that's trending even towards a guy that might be drafted in the first round that might come out of college. He didn't play at LSU. And this is a guy that Mickey Joseph recruited from LSU to come to Nebraska. Scott Frost, he had Omar Manning, Xavier Betts. These are highly touted guys. He was never able to accent them and get the most out of them. Mickey Joseph also with Thomas Fidone, who was also ironically choosing between LSU. He's wisely said that Tommy is going to wait until next year to fully recuperate and play. And, at Nebraska now, you have Chubba Purdy, who is highly touted, who I think is a decent thrower of the ball, who can run a little bit. But Heinrich Haarberg, to me, at 6'4", 6'5", is a very exciting quarterback prospect that I believe has all the talent in the world. And I know that he hasn't seen the field, but he's 6'5", and he kind of looks even like Justin Herbert did when he came out of high school, which is kind of ludicrous to say, but that's how much I think Haarberg has ability. But Mickey Joseph, when we compare Mickey now to the other candidates that are out there in Husker land, Mickey is, for all intents and purposes, that Oklahoma game was ridiculous under 1 week with Chenander. I'm going to say Mickey's 2-1. And if they would have stopped Aiden O'Connell, Trey Palmer, who had nearly 300 yards of scrimmage yards, Nebraska could have even found a way to beat Purdue at Purdue. And I think that's going to be one of the toughest games they play. Nebraska's not going to play a more explosive offense. I know they have to play Mo Ibrahim. I know that Illinois is really solid. But that is why and I guess Michigan. But that is why this Nebraska game this week was the ultimate test, and they got punched in the mouth. They were on the field 101 plays. It was ludicrous, the most since 2007 Iowa State. So Nebraska, I told you in this game, they had a high percent chance to get absolutely punked. And Mickey Joseph and this team play bend not break defense, and then he is getting the most out of not only Casey but of Trey and Anthony Grant. And he's accenting exactly the guys that you can. Now, I could argue that on the defensive line, Garrett and O'Shawn Mathis were better several years ago, so I guess you can make that point. But even Tommy Hill, they're very weak in the secondary, and their offensive line with Donnie Raiola, who knows if he's going to keep Raiola if he decides to come back again. But Mickey Joseph is, again, we talk about the old groceries analogy, you pick your own groceries. He's not exactly dealing with a team that he has picked, okay? So, and I know I have allergies, whatever. So that's the point here when we look at Mickey Joseph, okay? I think he's doing an amazing job. I'm emotionally attached to the guy. I'm beginning to develop even a bias towards Mickey because Mickey's story is unbelievable. He wanted to play for Barry Switzer at Oklahoma. He came from New Orleans. He had no attachment to the Midwest at all. He was a kid from the South, big city in New Orleans, and going out to the plains of Lincoln, Nebraska. And he didn't have a lot in common with the Midwest and with Nebraska. He had nothing in common, but his mother wanted him to really go to a mentor figure in Tom Osborne rather than a friend, a buddy in Barry Switzer, who he wanted to go to in the 80s when he played. And the thing is about Mickey Joseph is he says he fell in love with Lincoln. He fell in love with the culture. He fell in love with the fan base. He fell in love with the administration. And you're already seeing DeColdis Crawford, because of Mickey, go to Nebraska. You are seeing guys like O'Marion Miller. You're seeing great wide receiver talent. Trey Palmer is like an NFL first-round wide receiver talent. He's one of the best talents Nebraska has had at the wide receiver position, and it's all because of Mickey Joseph. And you look at Nebraska. I can look at Iowa. I could certainly look at even Purdue. There are programs in the Midwest that win. Utah is not even based in a very fertile recruiting ground. I guess you could say it's fertile in terms of there being, a lot of linemen come out of Utah and come out of Salt Lake City. It has a high number of Polynesians, just like Oregon, that are unbelievable linemen historically and that go to the league and that put on shows in the league. But Utah and Ty Whittingham was able to go and get Huntley, the quarterback of the Ravens, from Miami. They were able to recruit South Florida, and it's national. And you look at the transfer portal, and even Mel Tucker was able to get a squad that was able to go win a New Year's Six Bowl in East Lansing, and they're a little brother in that state to the University of Michigan. So this whole premise that Nebraska cannot compete on a national level, I believe, is ludicrous. You look at TCU this year, Oklahoma State. Kansas State's a good program. I believe in my heart of hearts that Mickey Joseph or that Nebraska can compete at a 9-1 level. I believe that with every fiber. And I even think Nebraska can have a year like Wisconsin where they are in Indianapolis and they have a chance to win the Big Ten. I believe that in 5 years they can do that. Now, I know USC is coming into the party, UCLA. It's going to make it more complicated. But now let's talk about Mickey. So that performance against Purdue, I believe, helped him because they didn't have the better team and they almost stole a game on the road against a great quarterback and against Purdue could have beaten Penn State this year. Purdue played undefeated Syracuse, should have beaten them this year. Purdue's a great football team. Illinois now is ranked. If Nebraska wins this game, which they're capable of if they stop Brown, the running back, they are in the driver's seat now with a ranked opponent and Mickey rolling at all cylinders. Trev Alberts has made it very difficult now. If he in the athletic director's seat, honestly, for Trev Alberts, if he wanted to hire Matt Rhule or he wanted to hire Lance Leipold or Dave Aranda, it would have been easier to roll with Chenander and let go of a threat in Mickey Joseph. It's almost like Mac Jones and Bailey Zappi now, where, if your backup quarterback is so damn good that you have a conflict with your starter. I mean, when you look at a young quarterback like Zach Wilson in the NFL, or let's just say a young quarterback, guys, that is starting out, like when Mahomes started out, when a guy like, let's say, who are the guys that were even drafted a couple of years ago? Trevor Lawrence. Who's the backup in Jacksonville? I don't even know who's the backup quarterback of the Jacksonville Jaguars. I really don't. It might be Chad Henne. Who the heck knows? It doesn't matter, because if Trevor Lawrence goes down, then who cares? My point is to say that if Trev Alberts wanted to make this an easy decision, then he wouldn't have had Mickey involved in the process at all. He would have chosen a very bland hire. He would have looked and said, okay, Bill Busch can just run the show. He would have depleted the whole thing, or maybe even let Scott Frost go even further, and he would have even announced the hire, earlier. So for Mickey Joseph now, this is what's going to happen, okay? Mickey is not going to hang around Nebraska as, Matt Rhule's, associate head coach. He's gotten to a point now where he sees, and deservedly so, he sees he's a head coach. And Power Fives are going to hire him. People should honestly hire him, just like Sonny Cumbie coached Louisiana Tech now, and he was at Texas Tech, if you followed that story. And Texas Tech beat Mississippi State in the bowl game. And so here's what can happen. All right, guys, let's just be as real now. We're to this point in the video. All right, we're 12 minutes into the video, and we're talking about Mickey. He can recruit because I know his personality. He's a straight shooter. He takes blame. He is emotional. He's a great person. He's very emotional. His stories are unbelievable, like how he sacrificed a whole year during Hurricane Katrina to move from Oklahoma, doing his college job, to help out a school that he helped invest in 100 kids to live in, like, Fort Myers, Florida for an entire year. The guy's been a servant his whole life, being a wide receiver coach, being a running backs coach, working at a lot of smaller schools, okay, in the South. And then he got a chance to go to LSU. So he's totally paid his dues. It's not to say that the other candidates haven't, all right, but Mickey Joseph, the fact that he goes to Nebraska, the fact that he has a relationship with Osborne, the fact that the team is doing well, these are all advantages for Joseph. The fact he's already there, the fact he's answering questions to the press, the fact that he knows guys like Sam McEwen and, of course, Steve Sipple. Nebraska, is it's a tight-knit place where we all read the World Herald, we all read the Lincoln General Star. I'm not even from Nebraska, but I've just listened to 1620 The Zone. I listen to the same podcast that you guys all do. And it's an incredible fan base. You look at you look at Tennessee, right? All right, the Vols, Tennessee Volunteers. And listen, all right, that team, Tennessee, guys, that team was exactly like the University of Nebraska, several years ago. So I don't necessarily believe that it's completely out of the question. People thought that Tennessee was dead, when they fired Jeremy Pruitt. They had all these recruiting violations. I don't believe it's that bleak. You look at Iowa State, they were nothing. You look at Baylor after Art Briles and all of the controversy there with the allegations of football players doing stuff. You look at the Cincinnati Bengals and Buffalo Bills, who are terrible historically in the last 25 years. You can get good. You can do it. You don't have to have that mentality. And to me, Mickey Joseph is a guy that he just gets great receivers. He gets great skill players. He knows the explosiveness. He knows the game. He knows where the game is going. He knows offensive football. He knows great quarterback play. He's been around Joe Burrow. Casey Thompson's a great quarterback. Matt Rhule, even at Temple and at Baylor, he's never had great quarterback play, ever. That's a big-time problem at Nebraska. Their defense might be fine. I believe Matt Rhule would improve the program, but his offenses have never been dynamic, and there's always been a ceiling to Baylor. They've never been close to, they were decently close, whatever, to getting into the playoff. But even Dave Aranda and Matt Rhule, to me, they're similar, both because they've been at Baylor, but both because their offensive systems, they like running the ball. It's very Big Ten-ish. I think that they are safer hires, ironically, than Mickey, but Mickey, I believe, is going to have a more explosive passing game. He relies more on wide receiver play and explosive plays. And you look at Tennessee and Josh Heupel, explosive plays. Bill O'Brien, Lane Kiffin, Steve Sarkisian, explosive running and passing plays. So Lance Leipold has explosive plays in that Kansas offense. I know that their defense fell off a cliff. Lance is about 61, bounced around a lot of places. Point is, if Mickey beats Illinois, if Mickey goes on a run, wins most of the games left on the schedule, which they can do, goes like 7-5, the fans are going to want him to stay. I personally am going to want to see more out of this guy because he's doing it with absolutely nothing or with very minimal left over from Frost. There's a couple of great players left. I love the guys are great guys. They're great kids, but there's going to be more talent that's going to come into Nebraska, let's be real, on the offensive lines and even the defensive lines. For Aiden O'Connell to drop back 60 times, it's not even like he's the most elusive quarterback with his feet. For him to not get hit is absolutely ridiculous and borderline. No, not borderline. It's unacceptable. So, in my honest opinion, Mickey Joseph, I believe, is the front runner for the job. He's done an amazing job at getting this program back. He is already recruiting at a high level. He's gone into an impossible situation. He's a guy that's been everywhere. He can really allocate resources to coordinators. He lets the coordinators coach the game. He has an excellent feel for time management. He's always involved with coaching on the sideline. His energy is fantastic. His attention to detail has been phenomenal. He's been tremendous in every step of this journey so far. Lance Leipold is a great coach. Matt Rhule's track record at Baylor and Temple are tremendous. Mickey Joseph hasn't had the opportunities yet that those guys have honestly had in terms of head coaching, but Mickey's been a tremendous and respected figure all across college football in his roles, in assistant coaching roles. And him and his brothers have unbelievable track records, not only in college football, but also professional football. So Mickey Joseph knows from his brother Vance, who was a head coach in the NFL with the Miami Dolphins and who has been a tremendous defensive coordinator for many, many years. He knows he has just incredible resources and incredible experiences. And I believe that Mickey Joseph, kind of like Sam Pittman, who was an offensive line coach for his entire career, or like Ed Orgeron, who was a defensive line coach, and Ed Orgeron achieved the highest level of successes. Sometimes the best coaches, even Dabo Swinney was a wide receiver coach who then was the interim coach. All right, sometimes the greatest coaches in college football fall into your lap, and I believe that Mickey just has that ability. He has the Nebraska story, which, again, I guess we're getting, in the dangerous territory with Scott Frost. But I have a feeling that there's going to be a pool of great coaches all the time. Matt Rhule is a guy that I think will ultimately land somewhere. But like Dave Aranda at Baylor, I still think that you could poach if you have a problem. I just want to see Mickey. I want Mickey to even get 2 or 3 years, and I just want to see it. And I also believe that for Nebraska in this circumstance, I think that Mickey Joseph would be very excited to take the job. I think that he would even sign up for a 3-year prove-it deal. Now, if we're just talking financial stuff here, whereas a coach like Dave Aranda would want 6 years of a guaranteed contract. You look at Matt Campbell, these guys are all like pretty good options. If I had to rate guys, I kind of like Aranda actually more than Rhule. I just think Aranda's just a special defensive mind. I think Lance Leipold is a really good coach. But of course I question like can his defenses match up? But it's Kansas, so I think he's a solid coach. I just believe I just believe he can connect with people from at different areas of the country. He knows about recruiting nationally. His relationship with Trev will be important. Unlike Frost, the difference between him and Scott is his game management is better in terms of Scott was just more of a play caller. Mickey's going to actually control the game, control time management, and then Mickey can develop wide receivers and explosive passing game better than anybody I believe on the list. He's been with Jefferson. He's been with Chase. He's been around NFL guys. His brother's the defensive coordinator in the NFL. His offensive schemes, to me, compared to Matt Rhule and compared to Aranda, compared to Matt Campbell, you look at those guys in particular, when's the last time Matt Campbell at Iowa State had an NFL receiver the ability of Trey Palmer? It hasn't happened. Mickey Joseph in this transfer portal, all the guys he brings in succeed. All right? When's the last time that Chris Kleiman, other than Deuce Vaughn, has had an amazing receiver, amazing passing game? You're always 7-5, 8-4 with those dudes. I mean, let's call it how it is, all right? Now, Lance Leipold actually has amazing offense. He's developed a 3-star quarterback over there in Daniels. So his offenses are fun to watch. So his offenses actually are explosive. I can't say that they're not. But I just believe Mickey's the guy for the job. His recruiting is tremendous. His poise, leadership, everything that you see, game management, there really isn't a weakness to this guy. And listen, if he falls off a cliff in these last couple games, we're going to have to reassess. This is a moving target. Come on, guys, let's be honest. Everybody says don't get caught up in the losses, but no offense, but if Pat Fitzgerald and David Shaw, if we were talking a couple years ago, their stock would be higher than this year. Let's just call it how it is. It is a little bit of recency bias, but that's honestly how it is. Matt Rhule's stock at Baylor was a lot higher than when he completely was inept on the offensive side of the ball, and he turned out one of the worst offenses and elected to select Sam Darnold and then elected to hire Ben McAdoo, who's failed as a coach many times. So, in my honest opinion, if I were to be really, really honest, I want Mickey to win. I do. I want Mickey to win this job. I want Mickey to do this. I'm confident that he has the ability to do it, and I'm leaning towards Mickey right now. And it's an amazing underdog story because you think he's just the interim, you think he's just a placeholder, and then somebody that has bigger experiences as a head coach was going to do it. You just thought he was the associate head coach that's just in there to finish out the season, and they'll do all right. They'll just get to the finish line. But no. This has been awesome. Personally, I love it. I think Mickey's Nebraska. I think he's the underdog. I think he has the heart of a lion. And I'm all in. I love the story. I'm all attached to it. It's emotional. It's like the guy who's always overlooked, the guy who's always the servant leader, the guy that just wanted to help out Scott Frost was really the gem all along. And that's what is inspirational. For anybody out there, it's like you might look at your life and be like, there's eight people that are ahead of me, or I'm neglected by the leader all the time. I'm neglected. I feel unimportant. You can look at Mickey Joseph's story where he's continued to grow, continued to grind, continued to take from head coaches, continued to stay along the path, and he got this brilliant opportunity, and he's now really showing his potential as a coach and how he's grown as a coach, and he's doing a phenomenal job, and I want to see it through because I believe his upside is special. I believe that the type of receivers and passing game and offense that can be developed under Mickey, his eye for talent, his eye for competition, the way that he weaves, kind of like Tom did, between being a really tough coach to deal with, but also being there and being supportive. He just has the right ethos of this football team. And it's amazing to watch because of all the losing, all the adversity. He's completely stripped that. All right, against Indiana under Frost, the team would have fought, we can't do this. And Scott would have been there. It would have been a moping atmosphere, a losing atmosphere. All right, against Rutgers, losing 13-0. Even when they punt it back to Rutgers, the old Nebraska of the last 10 years, or specifically the last 8 years, after Bowen, whatever, would have been like, all right, how are we going to blow this game? How are we going to find a way to lose? But Mickey is like, guys, just get an interception. We're training for this. How are we going to win this game? It's an attitude adjustment that Mickey's put onto this. And he's just flourishing. And I honestly just believe in him now. And again, Purdue is so good. Like I said, I have great respect for Brown. Great respect for Purdue. Aiden O'Connell's just a stud quarterback. I don't care what he does after Purdue. He is a 400-yard machine-like quarterback that dices up really good teams. And Nebraska this year on defense has been very deficient. And for them to be in that game, for Trey Palmer to have the game that he had, only in his fifth or sixth game overall, with him not getting a lot of snaps at LSU, that's Mickey. That's Mickey recruiting, Mickey developing. That's his position group just rising above and flourishing. And you get Mickey's imprints on every unit of the team. The potential of Mickey Joseph is not even quantifiable yet. It is the highest upside possible. He can end up alluring people to Nebraska from all over the country because, again, they might go to Lincoln and be like, it's not the big city. It's not Miami. It doesn't have a beach or whatever. It might not even be as big as Penn State, Ohio State. Lincoln, it's a slower lifestyle, slower pace. Mickey will be like, listen, it's going to be really fun. And you get here on Saturdays, and it's an amazing place to play college football. And the resources of NIL, you look at Tennessee, you look at these other programs. I know Tennessee's in a more fertile recruiting ground. I believe it can be done. All right, guys, so I believe Mickey can take this program and do it. I argued, his offenses are more dynamic than the other guys, and his receiver development and his knack for explosive plays. Just look at Aranda's offense. Look at Blake Shapen, his quarterbacks. Look at, they run the football, yes. They control the time, yes. It is a Big Ten style, yes. It is a risk with Mickey a little bit. I guess you could argue Scott Frost was also that explosive offensive coordinator type. I just think Mickey's offenses are going to be more dynamic than the other guys. And then with him and Lance Leipold, I just like his ability to recruit at a higher level, his ability to connect, his story. I just believe he's a dynamic leader that is rare. And you look at who are the best coaches in college football, they have dynamic leadership qualities. Let me know what y'all think.